The GTX 1060. Released in 2016, this graphics card was part of the now legendary GTX 10 series. Known for their rather impressive performance and good value, these cards lasted a lot longer than many others have, both before and after. All 10 series cards use the same architecture for their die, called Pascal. The main difference from the previous graphics architecture of Maxwell was the node shrink, from 28 nanometers on the majority of Maxwell chips to 16 nanometers on Pascal. The card we're looking at today is the 1060 6GB model. Although there is also a 3GB model, not only do I not have one at the moment, but the 6GB model was the go-to for anyone looking for a 1060. It doesn't help that the 3GB model released a month after as well, but at least they use the same Pascal chip, so maybe it wasn't a terrible deal if you decided to wait for the cheaper 3GB variant. The actual spec sheet would prove the wait was almost definitely not worth it. The 3GB model not only had half the VRAM, but also 128 less shading units than the bigger model. The GTX 1060 6GB had a total of 1280, while the 3GB one had 1172, even though they used the same die and had the same name of 1060. Other than those two differences, the cards were at least identical. They ran at a base clock of 1506 MHz and a boost of 1709 MHz. Pair that with the GDDR5 VRAM on a 192-bit memory bus and the 2002 MHz memory clock, and these GPUs play games of the era very well. And considering the launch price of $299, they kept the same tradition of the 10 series. Impressive performance at a good value basically ensured the 1060 would be a mainstay in budget PCs for years to come. For testing, I'm running the graphics card with an Intel Core i7-8700 and 32GB of dual-channel DDR4 running at 3000 MHz. All of the games ran today are at 1080p native resolution, of course with VSync turned off and no frame limiters. I've also decided to overclock this card by running Unigine Heaven and bringing up the core memory clocks until Unigine freezes or crashes. With NVIDIA's GPU boost already bringing the core clocks up, I was only able to get plus 100 on the core, and I only got about plus 200 on the memory. All of the benchmarks are ran with this overclock applied, although it's not a massive improvement, it is still a few frames here and there. With that out of the way, let's see how, according to the Steam hardware survey, the 1060 was the most used graphics card for over 5 years. Starting off with Forza Horizon 5 on the very high preset, 1080p, the 1060 hit an average of 77.6 FPS with 1% lows to only 75.9. Very solid preset, and we're hitting pretty high above 60 FPS already. Not bad at all. Not only that, but it was also only using just a smidge above 3 gigs of VRAM, so it's possible the 3 gig version would run 60 plus on this game with this preset as well. Although we're not talking about that card today, just purely speculation. Raising the preset up to Ultra, the second highest preset, we did drop performance, going to 53.2 FPS average and 1% lows of 49.2, so still not far off from the same 60 FPS mark. Personally, I'd go with very high and add some kind of anti-aliasing, but either way you slice it, the 1060 has great performance right at the gate. Up next is Cyberpunk 2077, running at 1080p with FSR 3.0 set to quality. On the medium preset, we had an average of 63.8 FPS average with 1% lows to 52.4. Playable frame rate, and the game looked alright. Obviously not fantastic, but I think it looked better with FSR to 1080p than just a native 900p. Either way, I was curious how upscaling looked, so it was worth a shot. The most important thing is the 1060 was still able to run it, and still able to hit 60 FPS. Of course with a lower preset, but for a game that's notoriously not very well optimized, at least from release it was, we were still able to get a pretty good frame rate. Now for Helldivers 2, and running at native 1080p on medium, we were returned 47 FPS average and lows to 34.3. During gameplay, I didn't honestly notice much slowdown. Mind you, I was fighting for my life because I'm honestly not good at this game, but at worst, it felt like a console experience, I suppose, which, for a GPU that's 10 years old playing a game that's only 2 years old, that's not bad at all. And don't worry, the gameplay included some tough parts as well, at least tough for me. Running Deep Rock Galactic at 1080p with the Ultra preset using DirectX 11, we saw an average of 174.6 FPS with 1% lows of 155.3. As per usual, DRG is getting super high frame rates, I'm sure largely in part to the lower poly style of the game, which in my opinion looks fantastic, although that may just be the nostalgia speaking. With a lot of effects going on, we never even drop below 100 FPS either, so a very solid experience with a pretty old card. Doom Eternal, I was able to get almost everything on Ultra Nightmare, except for the texture pool which was on Ultra since we didn't have enough VRAM for the two highest settings. Using these settings though, we got 80.4 FPS on average with lows to 53.6. While playing, for the most part it was above 60 FPS, except for when looking across the large open area. That's the only real time I saw it dip. Effects didn't affect it much, which is a little crazy considering, again, everything except textures was on Ultra Nightmare. Very impressive. For BeamNG at 1080p, running on the Ultra preset, we got 55.2 average and lows of 48.8. If you're fine with 30 to 60 FPS, this would be perfect. And after a while, I didn't even notice the lower frame rates compared to the smoother 60. It's still a blast to play. That being said, if you were looking to get at least 60, dropping the preset to just high gave us an average of 68.1 with lows at 63.5, and that's just a single preset down. Either way you go, higher fidelity or higher frame rate, there's no denying that it was running fantastic with a GPU from 2016. After these benchmarks, it's really no wonder it lasted so long in so many people's PCs. Running Risk of Rain 2 with max graphics at 1080p and using the Swarms artifact to double how many enemies are spawned to get at least a little closer to late game performance metrics, we got an average of 156.2 FPS with 1% lows of 127.4. Now, of course, late game you'll probably be seeing much lower FPS, but again, this is on max settings, and even though it's early game with a lot less enemies, there's no denying that the 1060 is handling it like a champ. Worst case, if you saw it drop in the late game, you could always just drop your settings as well. Running Counter-Strike 2 with a custom workshop FPS benchmark map using competitive settings, low everything, high dynamic shadows. At 1080p we got 322 FPS average with lows down to 144.2. Lows above 144, not bad, not to mention the high average. And changing the resolution to 1440 by 1080, the 4:3 aspect ratio, we even picked up some extra frames, getting 362 average and 154 lows. Lows only gain 10 more, but the average going up by 30 is kinda big, although maybe not as much at these high frame rates. It's possible that at this point we're even hitting a CPU bottleneck. I'm saying the 1060 is great for competitive, although cannot confirm, I don't play CS2 a lot. Finally, for games, we have Minecraft. Running with Sodium and Iris at 1080p vanilla shader, we were getting hundreds of FPS easily, so for a real stress test, I enabled complementary reimagined shaders. Using the complementary's high preset, we had 74.9 FPS average with 1% lows of 61.6. The game looked fantastic and ran above 60 FPS consistently, so if you were thinking about using shaders, it looks like the 1060 could just about handle it. At least complementary reimagined, I guess. Although that's on the high preset, so it stands to reason that more intensive packs on slightly lower settings would still run just fine. Last but not least are the 3D Mark numbers. In Firestrike we got 14,817, in Time Spy a solid 4,672, and Steel Nomad we pulled a score of 991. Comparing this to an AMD RX 580, it actually ends up pretty competitive. They seem to be relatively equal in performance to each other. Although the 580 has 2GB more VRAM, so if you're looking for higher resolutions and more defined textures, the RX 580 will get you a little further than a 1066GB, and definitely more than a 3GB. So, all that being said, after all the charts, it's pretty easy to see how the GTX 1060 stayed a favorite pick for gamers for so long. Performance like that for a good price has went a long way, especially compared to the 960 released before it, almost double the performance, and looks like it could still go quite a ways further. It's always impressive how the Pascal cards are holding up in the modern day, and every game today on this old budget card ran fantastic. Of course, some better than others. But I think that the 1066GB is still a safe budget pick if you can find it for pretty cheap, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find a time you're disappointed, at least from a budget point of view.